Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again this week, going back to November 1st, 1988, when we talk about the second studio album from Crimson Glory, Transcendence. But before we talk all things Crimson Glory, how are you, my friend?
Good. I feel like we haven't done this in a while. It feels like we've been on kind of a vacation, so to speak. But it's good to be back in the saddle. We got 3 more episodes before we head off to Prog Power. A programming note: Justin and I will both be joining our friends at the MSR Cast to preview Prog Power this year. Sean the Metal Pigeon will be making his long-awaited debut at the festival, and so we were told that he might have some questions to ask, and we always enjoy chatting with Carrie and Sean, so keep an eye out for that. We will definitely post that episode when it drops, and we have our bonus episode as well that will be coming up before the end of the month, where we rank the bands playing at Prog Power based on our excitement levels of seeing them. And I will say, up to this point, this has been kind of a difficult exercise, just because there's more bands than usual that I'm rather excited to see. I just think it's a very stacked lineup depending on your tastes. It's funny because I saw some people posting on Facebook earlier today talking about their top 5 bands, and it's just funny how everybody has a wildly different top 5. And I'm sure ours will be different as well, but I expect that there might be 1 or 2 bands that overlap in that higher tier. But yeah, there's a lot to look forward to. So lots to come in that realm, and I look forward to chatting with you and the MSR Cast guys, and we have our Patreon group chat coming up, and we're inviting everyone that is a Patreon member to this group chat before Prog Power, which we don't usually do, but we figure there's probably going to be more people that are excited about Prog Power, so we're inviting everyone. So keep an eye out for that as well. Lots to look forward to in August before we switch gears and check out some live music in September.
Yeah, no doubt. And I went to see a show this past weekend, and it's funny. I went for many, many months without seeing anything, and now I'm seeing a ton of shows in a very short period. But I went to see Agalloch in New York City, and let me tell you something. This was a real treat. And I say that because this is a band that I got into relatively recently. They've been around for a while, haven't released anything new in a long time, but I recently got on the bandwagon, and when I found out that they were playing in New York City, A, I was shocked, because why, at this point? And B, it just completely was different than what I anticipated going in. When I saw the venue that they were playing, and they were playing a place called Brooklyn Steel. It's kind of like a Terminal 5 in the sense that there's a big floor, and then there's a second layer where you can kind of, a U shape that you can kind of surround the stage from higher up. But it holds 1,800 people, and I thought that venue was not the right venue for a band that has not really done much as of late. And boy, was I surprised, because I think there were at least 1,500 people in this crowd for a band that I didn't think was on anyone's radar. They sounded great. They performed like they haven't missed a beat. They were very tight. It is a band that I think would do really well on the Prog Power or the 70K stage. Just a really, really good show. And I hope that it leads to more music from them, because I know a lot of people will be eagerly awaiting new Agalloch music if and when that comes down to fruition. But really, really impressed. And I've got a day scheduled this weekend. I'm going to Prog Storm in Montreal to go see Pure Reason Revolution, play the Dark Third and some other classics. And then I'm going to see Iron Maiden with Megadeth and Anthrax. And this is all before I get to Atlanta. So I've got a busy few weeks, but I'm very, very excited. It was far too long for me to not see live music, so now I'm just inundating myself with it. I'm
going to go see the Spin Doctors. So
listen, nothing wrong with that at all. In fact, I bet they put on a great show for what they are.
Yeah, they're opening for the Gin Blossoms and Blues Travelers playing as well. I think I had mentioned it before, but I'm looking forward to it. 3 bands I really liked growing up, and just waiting for the last minute because the tickets for those 3 bands are shockingly expensive. And I don't want to spend over $100 to see those bands. So
I saw Agalock for $40, and I thought I was getting a bargain.
Yeah, it seems that way nowadays. Anytime you pay less than $75 for a concert ticket, I know I've mentioned this before, but I remember thinking that Manowar was out of their minds when they were charging like $75 for a ticket, and now it's like, if Manowar played a show in the U.S. and charged $75 for tickets, I'd be like, hell yeah, sign me up.
When they played New York City, I guess this was either a year or 2 ago, and they sold out the King's Theater. No, not joking, by the way. It's literally the Kings of Metal played the King's Theater. Look it up. The tickets were like $300 and up. It was insane how expensive they were, even by Manowar standards. But the place sold out. So if I guess, you know what? Supply and demand, right? If people are willing to pay, what can you do?
Yeah, it's just crazy. I'm thankful that there still are shows like, you know, Agalock for You, and the Deer Hunter show that I went to recently was, I want to say tickets were like $35 for that. So there's still some shows you can go to that don't cost an arm and a leg, but it's becoming few and far between, unfortunately.
Yeah, just like everything else. But I'll get off the soapbox for now. I want to just mention a couple of things that caught my ear this week that are definitely worth mentioning. The first is a band out of the UK called Osric Tentacles. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but they're a progressive rock, space rock thing going on. It's really hard to describe their sound. And I was never a huge fan. They've been around for a long, long, long time. I think they go back to like 1983 or something like that. So they've been around the block for over 40 years at this point. But I thought the album was really cool. It had all these like spacey effects and stuff. And it was like something that you kind of just have on in the background and just kind of immerse yourself in it while you got other things going on. So I wanted to just mention that album. And staying in the UK, and I'm probably going to butcher this name, but there was a band called Albion from the UK that has released an album, first one in a couple of years. This one is called It Was in the Month of May, and this was kind of like folky prog rock. It's not spacey, but it has like that folk sound, and I really enjoyed their last album. I think this one was very good just the same. And I wasn't just listening to prog rock, I swear. I also listened to the new Raunchy album. I don't know if you're familiar with them. Raunchy is a band, I think they're out of Denmark, and they kind of blend genres. A little bit of metalcore, a lot of melodic death metal, but a lot of the passages have clean vocals, and they almost have a Frontiers vibe in spots. So they're kind of like genre bending in their own way, but a really cool album, and their first one, I think, in about a decade or so. I'll post one of their tracks this week for sure so that people can hear it. But this one kind of came out and wasn't on most people's radars just because they've been kind of off the grid for quite some time. So cool album. I think definitely worth a listen.
Nice. I'll definitely check that out. The only thing I want to mention this week, I've been really off of my game with the new stuff. I've really been focusing on prog power bands. I used to start listening to prog power bands in like May, and now I wait till about mid-August just to make sure that the lineup is still intact and all that. And so I've made my way through day one, and I was meant to start day two today, but I just was too busy. I ended up listening to this Crimson Glory album twice today, not
Nice.
much else, but there was a single that came out from Mortemia, and I've been kind of keeping tabs on that cover collab sessions, being released album or song by song, I should say, of covers. And the latest one is the Kate Bush classic, Running Up That Hill. It features Federica Lana from Volturian, and it's pretty much in the vein of the Within Temptation version that came out all those years ago, but it's a cool version. I enjoy Federica's vocals, so that was cool. And they continue to release cool covers with all of the some of the real big heavy hitter names in the female vocalist realm. So I enjoyed that, and I think there's one more track left to be released. I think that was the 11th of 12. So I'm guessing after we get back from Atlanta, I'll start catching up on some of the new stuff. I'm not too behind, but I just haven't really listened to much new stuff. I've been kind of training on a different thing with work, and so it hasn't been conducive to listening to much. And I got caught behind on this Crimson Glory album, and I had to do a kind of a cram session this week and listen to the album twice per day for the last couple of days, just because I was ill prepared. But I think that after the fifth or so listen, I was ready to rock, so to speak. So
this is an interesting album. I'll just tell you a little bit about my journey. I listened to Crimson Glory for the first time well after this album in their heyday. I listened to them, I think, for the first time in the late 90s. And I didn't start with this album. I had started with Astronomica, which was their newest album, at least at the time. And for those that have been following the band, that came out in 99. So I kind of caught on to this band about 10 years after this arguably and widely considered, I guess, their best album. And Astronomica did not feature Midnight on vocals. It did not sound very much like this album. And so when I went back for the first time at some point in the 2000s and I listened to Transcendence, I said to myself, it seemed a little dated to me. And I don't know that I ever spent enough time with it. I've listened to it many times, but I don't know that I ever listened to it enough where it really resonated or that I found it offensive, or I just didn't form an opinion. I just didn't listen to it enough. Because the listens were sporadic and spread out over many years. So I was happy when it won the poll.
Who was the drummer on that Astronomica album? Do you remember?
Was it Ben Timely? No, I really don't remember.
Dr. Killdrums.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know why I remember that, but
well, I'm looking at Wikipedia. It says he was credited as the drummer, but actually didn't play on the album. So Lord only knows who actually.
I guess maybe he was touring with them at the time.
That's possible. And I actually enjoy that album a lot. That's something I would like to cover at some point. But this album from 1988 is widely considered to be their best. And just for I guess to go on the record here, Midnight on all vocals, John Drenning on lead guitars, Ben Jackson on rhythm guitars, Jeff Lords on bass, and Dana Burnell on drums. And this is a band that I feel like was, other than this album, was always kind of under the radar as compared to some of their peers. And I would consider their peers like Queensryche and Fate's Warning. I think those are the two that jump out to me the most. But I don't know that they ever achieved the success that some of those other bands would go on to achieve, or maybe even had achieved by this point. What was your first exposure to the band, and had you ever listened to this album prior to this week?
I'll answer your second question first. No. And I will answer your first question next. Crimson Glory was always one of those bands that, I knew the name. It was you were supposed to know who they were. If you were a metalhead, it was just one of those names. But it wasn't until they were playing at Prague Power, and that happened to be that year that I started to go back again. They replaced Andre Matos, who was set to headline Friday night, and Midnight had just recently passed away, and they ended up doing kind of like a tribute show with all these different vocalists that came out and played with the band. That said, I don't really have strong recollections. I know I was there for the set. I just wasn't familiar with their stuff, and I would continue to remain unfamiliar until they started to release new stuff recently. And so I started picking up the new singles, but going back and listening to this album was really it was new for me. This past week or so, I really did not have any expectations. I wasn't really sure what to expect. But thank you to all those who voted for it. It kind of ran away with the votes. It wasn't close. So clearly there was a lot of people that have a lot of affinity to this album. And after listening to it for a week, I can understand why.
I voted for it, to be honest with you. I don't know if you voted, but I actually voted for it as well, because I wanted to spend the time with it. And I did think that it was obviously apt, because not knowing what they're going to play in Atlanta, I do have to think you're going to hear at least half of this album, if not 3/4 of it. So I wanted to be familiar with it. Not to spoil anything, but Crimson Glory really was not high on my list of stuff that I wanted to hear prior to this week. So I wanted to see if I would give them the fair college try before actually seeing them, or at least giving them a chance in Atlanta. I do question whether or not anybody else can sing this album, though. And that, to me, is going to be really interesting.
Are you familiar with their current vocalist? Because I'd never heard of him.
Other than his work on the Crimson Glory material, I'm not familiar with him. And you want to talk about somebody with big shoes to fill. Now, I understand that Midnight had been out of the band, and obviously Wade Black took over the vocal duties in 1999. But let's not mince words. Midnight was always considered the voice of the band. And again, this is coming from someone that really enjoyed Astronomica and Wade Black's performance on the album. But what you hear on Transcendence and the vocal lines on this album, you put it up there, at least for me, with some of the other vocal performances where the guy could sing a phone book. He had that magical a voice. The Jeff Tates, the Michael Kisks, the Andre Matoses of the world, where it almost doesn't matter what they sing. And if there's good music behind the person, it's just going to make the album or the music that much better. It was really a transformative experience for me, because I don't know that I ever appreciated Midnight until this week, where I was just listening to him nonstop.
I would say I'm in the same boat as you, and I'll ask you a question that maybe you were waiting till the end to ask, but I'll jump right to it. Has listening to this album increased your desire to see this band live in 3 weeks?
So to answer your question, I guess yes and no. I definitely have a deeper appreciation for these songs. And there's one or two in particular, which I'm actually really happy and eager to see live, including my song of the week, which just a standout song and one of the best songs I think I've ever heard, or at least in quite some time. The flip side is I have some trepidation about who's singing it, because it's not Midnight. Now, there's other bands like Queensryche where I say, well, Todd La Torre does a really good job of filling in for Jeff Tate, which is almost an impossible task. Ironically, as an aside, Todd La Torre sang for Crimson Glory for 3 years, so you might have a unicorn there. But at the end of the day, I'm going to give it a fair shot, and it moved it up enough that I do want to see it. I'm curious to see it, especially because of these tracks that we're going to talk about momentarily.
Yeah, I think I feel the same, honestly. Again, like you said, it's hard to replace such an iconic vocalist, and I say that being familiar with him for all of a week. But I mean, I could just from listening to it, it's like, who's gonna fill those shoes? It's kind of hard to picture, but there's a handful of songs on here that I'm like, especially I think the last set list they had, they played 7 songs off this album, so I'm probably gonna know at least half of the set, and maybe even a little bit more if they play a couple of newer tracks. I think I probably went from just not caring at all to being very curious, and I don't know if I'm excited, but I don't know that I'm necessarily calling this an automatic break band anymore either. So it's probably going to be a game time decision, as they say, but it certainly has increased my curiosity and interest for sure.
Well, I think that's part of the reason I'm happy that we selected it, because I'm not sure that we would have said that but for this deep dive. So let's get into it. And the album starts off with a really interesting opener, in my opinion, because even though it's catchy as all hell, and I'm talking about Lady of Winter, it's surprisingly straightforward and somewhat nondescript for me. I know it's one of the bigger songs on the album, and Midnight's vocals immediately jump out on this track is absolutely fantastic. But I don't know that it's one of the best tracks on the album, and I may take heat from longtime fans for saying it, but there's so much better material that I think it's just a really good opening track because it's catchy, but I think there's better songs on the album. It reminds me a lot of what Fate's Warning was doing around the same time in the late 80s. And I have to say, I think the album suffers a little bit from just an older mix. It sounds like an album that was recorded in 1988. And with a little bit of modern polish, I think it would probably sound a lot better. But I will say that with the benefit of headphones or earbuds, it sounds a lot better than it does on just standalone speakers. There's this proggy instrumental section on this particular song, which I really enjoy. And again, I would just say it's a good opener for sure.
I think that the album sounds pretty good for 1988. Like I've definitely heard worse. I feel like it sounds better. It sounds better than Keeper 2 and Kings of Metal. I think there were parts where I was like, I felt like the drums and the bass were really prominent, which I feel like those are usually the first two instruments to suffer from a poor mix. Either that or they're too loud. But this was the first single from the album, and I think it was a good choice as a single. Like, I think that I agree with you. There's songs I certainly like better, but I feel like this one has kind of a more inviting kind of vibe to it. If you were going to play this type of music on the radio, I feel like this would have been a good radio hit. I'm sure. I have to believe there's a music video for this that was on MTV, because this just would have been that prime time.
It was the first single for the album.
Yeah.
So it should come as no surprise because it is so kind of straightforward and accessible compared to some of the other quirkier material that's on here. Not that it's better, it's just more straightforward.
Yeah. Actually, it doesn't look like if there is a music video for this song. Oh, nope, there's some live versions, but yeah, I guess it doesn't, it's not on YouTube if one exists. For whatever reason, I completely pictured an MTV music video, just your classic 1988 metal video in a warehouse somewhere with giant 100%. Fans and hair blowing everywhere. But yeah, it's solid tune, good opener. I think you get a good sense of what the band's all about, what Midnight, his vocals are like, although I think that there's even more impressive outings from him to come on this album, but I'm glad that they didn't just like blow their load on the first song with like one of the best songs on the album. I feel like it kind of eases you in.
Yeah, I agree with that. Whereas when you compare it to the second track, this was one of those songs that I remembered pretty darn well from the album, Red Sharks. As an aside, every time I hear the title of this track, it reminds me of the stupidest thing, but it reminds me of One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish by Dr. Seuss. But nonetheless, Red Sharks is where we're at. This is a faster song, and that dual guitar attack jumps out right away. And you talked about the drums being louder in spots. This is one of those songs where the drums are really prominent in the mix. And I think the verses are very aggressive and they have almost a sanctuary vibe to them. I almost hear Warrell Dane doing his thing on this particular track. But some of those high notes that Midnight sings is like mind-blowing. Like the vocal performance on this track is absolutely ridiculous. I think the chorus is a bit more straightforward, but again, the vocals make the track so good. And then it has this really dark bridge. And I keep thinking again of like a King Diamond or somebody in terms of the way that the vocal delivery kind of presents itself. It's a bit of a cheesy tune in some respects, but it doesn't take away from the enjoyment. I think this is an even better song than Lady of Winter.
I think I will take a page out of Dr. Seuss's book and say, this one has a little car. This one has a little star. This one looks a little meek. This song is my song of the week, Red Sharks.
I love it. Let's give it a listen, and then I want to hear why. That was Red Sharks, your song of the week. Why did you choose it?
Honestly, just that vocal passage of Midnight saying, "Hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil." It's just,
oh my God.
It's just it's one of those things that like it made me think of Pat, because it sounds like one of those things that Pat would just repeat over and over again in falsetto. Just like one of those little vocal lines that he just attaches himself to. That was like just one of his little tics, I guess, and that's what it just made me think of. He would just burst into a room and sing like a line of a song and then disappear. But I, honestly, like the whole song is really killer. Like I love how it starts out with this really killer riff. I mean, and right off the bat, like I'm thinking to myself, this has some power metal vibes to it. And then it kind of goes into that guitar intro, and like I'm already like hooked in at this point. And then, Midnight comes in and just like blows the whole track wide open. And it's I think the drumming is really impressive on this. Like just you could tell that the drummer Dana Burnell is just kicking the shit out of the kit on this song. This, it turns out, I looked at the set list, and spoiler alert, this is the last song that they played at their last set. I don't know if that's static or whatnot, but I'm like, what a great choice to kind of go out on. And I kind of am hoping to catch this. I'm so curious if their new vocalist can sing this song, because I feel like this probably is the most difficult song on the album to sing live. And
probably not easy to do at the end of a set, too, as an aside. I love this song as well. I completely understand why you chose it. And if I wasn't so enamored with one of the other tracks, it was in contention for me as well, but not my choice. Good choice, though. I'm glad you chose it. And then we move ahead to Painted Skies, which was another track that I almost had as a song of the week. I would argue maybe my favorite of the first three tracks. That's how good Painted Skies is. I love the acoustic guitars at the beginning that kind of make you feel like this is going to be a ballad with these beautiful verses that are top notch. And then the chorus is just like classic 1980s metal in just about every single respect. I never realized how clean Midnight's vocal delivery was, but he is so clean and crisp on this track. I just thought it was a really beautiful power ballad with an emotional guitar solo. I was a big fan of Painted Skies, and it's another one I'd like to see them play.
I like this one a lot, too. It has a little bit more of a chill vibe to it, and I think that it will translate well to a live setting. But I think it's a really perfect song to follow. I think Lady of Winter was like a pretty good slightly more up-tempo than mid-tempo. Red Sharks was more of a banger, and then now we're kind of slowing it down a little bit, and it really does have that kind of 80s metal vibe where you have a kind of like an acoustic guitar verse with an electric guitar chorus. And I feel like the drums really shine because of the kind of the more calmness of the guitars, being that you're not getting like wild soloing and stuff and heavy riffing. The drums really, I think, audibly keep the beat of the song going, and it has this kind of march-like tempo to it, but really, really cool song. And just I think with these first three tracks, I think you're really getting a sense at how versatile the band is, with three songs that I think really have their own kind of flavor.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Like I said, I was a huge fan of this. And then we get to track 4 on the first side of the album, Mask of the Red Death. This is a really guitar-driven tune, I guess. But then it doesn't take long for the bass to kind of really pop out. And this is going to be the first of several tracks where the bass is really prominent. And quite frankly, I think adds another dimension to the band. This one has a really futuristic vibe to it. It has some weird sound effects and some guitar noodling that really has like a almost ahead of its time type of vibe to it. And I wouldn't call it a monumental song or a song that just blows me away, but I did think it was well placed after Painted Skies. And Midnight really picks up some steam towards the end, because by the end he is just wailing and it sounds absolutely fantastic. There's bits of this song though that remind me so much of Invaders by Iron Maiden that I was almost distracted by how much I thought the two sounded together, but it's a good song. Not my favorite, but a good tune.
There's like that little guitar riff that goes like dun 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 dun, and it reminds me so much of a song that would come out the following year by the band Pink Cream 69. It was the opening track from their debut album, and the song was called "Take Those Tears." And if you listen to the two songs back to back, you'll probably feel that you'll hear that there's some similarities in the guitar work. That was the first Pink Cream 69 song I ever heard with Andy Darris on vocals. Shout out to Ralph. I remember him playing me that song, and I was like obsessed with it ever since. I was like, this is such a good song. And you hear like this very young Andy Darris back in 1989. We definitely need to do a PC 69 album one of these days. But circling back to
choosing the album.
Yeah, exactly. Circling back to the track, it's about the story written by Edgar Allan Poe. This was one of my favorite songs on the album, actually, even though it's kind of, again, a little bit more of a mid-tempo song. It's probably most similar to Lady of Winter of all the songs that we've listened to up to this point. But, like Midnight's vocals really carry the day on this album and on this track in particular, and I just really enjoy it. I can see why they're going to focus their set on a lot of songs from this album. So
no doubt about it. And as you kind of end side A with In Dark Places, it's really a 7-minute epic to end the first half of the album, and it's the longest track on the album as well. This one, slower, darker, and I would use the word deliberate to kind of describe this track. Solid verses, some really spooky sounds in the background, which provide like a nice touch as well. The chorus picks up a little, but more than anything else, this is the Midnight Show in many respects. I think it's almost like a plea for help, and you feel really, you can feel the emotion behind the vocals on this one. A good song, but probably my least favorite of side A. Not because it's a bad song, but I do think it pales in comparison to the other 4. Although I have to say the instrumental section on In Dark Places was amongst one of my favorites on the album. So that section alone, I really enjoyed. I thought it was a pretty decent way to end side A.
Yeah, I think I was like kind of with you, and then by the time the song got to about halfway through, and we got some keyboards in there with the soloing, that was actually one of my favorite solo sections on the album, just because it had a really synth driven 80s style solo, which I thought was cool. This almost kind of reminds me of like like a more modern Mr. Crowley, like where it has that same type of tempo and kind of there's a real creepiness to the whole song. And then when you throw in those keyboards, I think it adds to kind of the spooky atmosphere. And so, cool song. I think it was cool that they did something that was a little bit more bold with this longer track. And I think it works. I don't feel like it ever really overstays its welcome. And I think it does a nice job of wrapping up the side A, as you will.
And I think that side B, just as a whole, kind of picks up where In Dark Places left off, insofar as it's a bit proggier, a bit more experimental, and a bit more keyboard driven as compared to maybe those first few tracks. And so we start side A, track 6, with Where Dragons Rule. What were your thoughts on this opening track to side B of the album?
Another one of those, just like, who the hell is going to be able to sing this live? There's just certain points. And really, it's like, it's not just like, you know, some of those like power metal singers that you'd hear where it's just high pitched vocals the whole time. Like this, you know, Midnight had a range that was just, you know, he had like really soulful lower register, and then this like, you know, mind boggling high pitched, you know, vocals. And this song really is like a journey through that whole range, in my opinion. It's not one of my favorite songs on the album because I think that it's kind of plodding. You know, again, it's like another mid-tempo song. It's not bad by any stretch. I think I just enjoyed some of the other songs a bit more, but I feel like the vocals are really the star on this, because you really just get the whole range of what Midnight can do, all wrapped up into one song.
And he has the uncanny ability to go in and out of the different ranges with like seamlessly. Like I would imagine it would be very difficult to do live, although I'm sure he can. This song was kind of a banger insofar as it's a heavier song. The drums and the bass lines in particular, I thought were fantastic on this, and it almost has a march-like quality to it, at least until it gets going. And it's one of those songs that I can just see the crowd kind of banging their head to and pumping their fist in the air. And I imagine it would be one of those songs that would come off great live. I would imagine like the old school fans would eat a song like this up and not look back. I thought it was a good song, but I think it's completely overshadowed by the next track, Lonely.
I would say Where Dragons Rule is probably one of those songs that is more enjoyable in a live setting.
Yes.
Like I just feel like it would be a cool song to see live, I think, with everybody singing along and stuff. But agreed 100%. I think that Lonely really the album picks up again with this song. This was the second single from the album, and it's almost kind of like a combination of like a power ballad, but also like a power metal song also. Yeah. Like it does both. This is a really great tune.
I loved this track, and the first time I heard it, I almost didn't believe what I was hearing, and then the second time I heard it, I'm like, oh yeah, this song is outstanding. It was and I don't say this often, but it was a runaway choice for my song of the week. I love this track. Let's give it a listen, and I'll kind of walk you through why I chose it. Where do I start with Lonely?
The beginning.
I'm going to try. The keyboard effects automatically stood out to me. and they sound great with that guitar tone. I absolutely adore the verses. I think the vocal lines are gorgeous. And I love how they actually use dual Midnight vocals in spots. I thought that was really cool. And it makes you think that this is going to be a ballad, but God, does this thing pick up. It winds up becoming a really heavy song that just maintains that same melody throughout. And it's almost like the story is being told on this track. Fantastic riffs, fantastic vocals. And I can't help but think about that big 80s Queensryche feel on this track. And I think that's part of the reason I love it, because I'm a sucker for 80s Queensryche. This was 80s Queensryche, just done by another vocalist who's, dare I say, almost as, if not as good as Jeff Tate. I'm in.
If I didn't know any better when this song started, I would have thought that it was Queensryche, especially that era of Queensryche. It really is a contemporary song, I feel. There was no music video for Lady of Winter, but there is one for Lonely. So when you share your song of the week on social media, post the video, because I think that is kind of what I was expecting the video for Lady of Winter to look like, is exactly what this video looks like. Although there does seem to be some interspersing of a woman in a nightgown laying in a bed. So, I mean, this is about as 80s.
Are you going to just keep replaying the video for the rest of the night? Is that where this is going? Or
I mean, I probably would, but it's in like 240p. So because it's from
too grainy.
1988. I think they tried to upscale it to 4K, and I'm like, a music video from 1988 was not meant to be viewed in 4K. But I digress. Great song. Not at all surprised that it's your song of the week. It's a great choice. I enjoyed it as well. It's one of my favorite on the album, and one of the songs that I think is going to be a really fun track to hear live. I feel like Midnight doesn't need to do like too much of the theatrical stuff on this one, because the song, I think the melody of the song kind of carries it. It doesn't need him to be the ridiculous self that he is capable of doing, which is cool. I like that he kind of parked it a little bit and said, let's let the song speak for itself, instead of, because, when you have a voice like that, I'm sure the temptation is to really go overboard and be real masturbatory about it. And I feel like he really does a nice job balancing it throughout the album, where it doesn't feel like he's relying on it in a gimmicky sort of way. So yeah, great track. I'd probably call this my runner-up, honestly.
Nice. And I agree with your assessment of the vocal delivery on this one. And as we kind of forge ahead here on the tail end of the album, we get to track 8 called Burning Bridges. This one also kind of starts off like a ballad with the acoustic guitars. And then it has some of these really dark samples until the electric guitars come in, and it kind of brightens the whole song up, which is kind of an interesting way to do it, because normally the acoustic guitars are not as, or like the airier part, and then the electric guitars make it really dark and crunchy. Here, I think it's actually the opposite. But the best part of the song for me was that psychedelic bridge. I wasn't expecting that, but I thought it was a cool touch. It's kind of odd. It's kind of proggy, but it somehow worked for me. And what was probably the most interesting thing about this track are that some of the drum fills, especially towards the end, was similar to what Mike Portnoy was doing around the same time on some of the early Dream Theater material. A solid tune, just overshadowed by the former song. So I would love to hear your thoughts on Burning Bridges.
Of all the songs that this reminds me of, again, another Ozzy song, it reminded me a bit of No More Tears, which hadn't even been released yet. Just the way that the guitar tone is in spots, and it kind of has, I think, a similar, tempo. Although, it does kind of go back to like that kind of that spooky verse, heavy chorus kind of thing that we talked about earlier, where it really does have that kind of. There's another. I feel like a Queensryche kind of comes up again with this song, with the acoustic guitar, and I feel like when Midnight does his lower register, it's similar to Jeff Tate, whereas I feel like his high vocals are not similar to Jeff Tate. But Yeah, it really is kind of. I forgot which song we were talking about earlier, where it was kind of like you have the acoustic guitar going on in the verses, and then the electric in the chorus. But it's one of the more epic songs on the album at 6.5 minutes. I think it's a solid follow up to a really strong song in Lonely. So yeah, good tune.
The way the album ends is kind of interesting. Eternal World, the penultimate track, has a really interesting feel to it. It reminds me a lot of the same type of music that Savatage was doing around this time in the mid to late 80s. The song itself is surprisingly fast, almost like a power metal song meets prog metal. A lot of double bass drums and stuff, and it's a very dark song in an 80s kind of way. I would imagine that it would have been very difficult to play live just because it felt like there was so much going on this track. But I thought it was a really solid tune, and certainly a different type of tune than the title track, which ends it.
It feels like a 90s power metal song that hasn't been invented yet.
Ahead of its time. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I just circling back again to like Burning Bridges, like when it gets towards the end of that solo part with the keyboards coming in, like, man, it really does remind me a lot of No More Tears. So just to circle back to that, but yeah, Eternal World, apparently was written initially as an instrumental song for when the band was touring their first record in the Netherlands, of all things. And then I guess eventually they laid down some vocals to it. And it's one of the shorter songs on the album. I think it's the shortest. It's a solid song. I wouldn't say it's one of my favorites. I really like the guitar work and the solo. I think that's kind of the highlight for me. But at this point, it's probably my least favorite song on the second half of the album. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Listen, the reality is, I think it provides a nice contrast to Transcendence as a final track. This has a grandiose ending, and it feels like a track that should wrap up the album. But it's also a little bit odd because it's different than everything that came before it. It really kind of features a really distinct guitar tone during the verses, and kind of subdued vocals that open up a little bit as the song progresses. I wouldn't call it a ballad, but like a ballad adjacent type of tune. And there's a little bit of a nod to almost Led Zeppelin with the guitar work on some of this track. Just a cool way to end it. I won't say it's my favorite track, but I just thought it was an interesting end to the album because I thought it had a different feel than everything that came before it.
The guitar that starts off the song, the tone of it reminded me of like old Metallica, but almost like a better produced, guitarist tone than what you would have heard on like Ride the Lightning or Master of Puppets. But then the song really kind of comes into its own again. It reverts back to that kind of like quiet and spooky, verse where it's really just acoustic guitar and Midnight singing in his kind of more Jeff Tate-ish voice. And it kind of just maintains that throughout the whole song. Like, based on some of the other songs we heard up until this point, I'm waiting for the chorus for the electric guitars to kind of come in and for things to pick up, and it just doesn't. It's and not that that's a bad thing. It's just, I think that...
No, but that's why I say it's a different way to end the album, because it's not what you're expecting.
I think it's the right call too, just because it's totally different, I think, than any of the other songs on the album. And it keeps that kind of haunting vibe to it. It almost reminds me a little bit of kind of what Iced Earth would end up doing, in that kind of just like, they just had kind of like a bit of a downturn kind of spookiness to their music that I think made them stand out. Which I guess shout out to them, because that was the runner up for what album we were going to talk about this week. Which I think I'm going to have to just give the Dark Saga a listen to start to finish before we head to Atlanta. It's on the docket. But I like this as a last track. And there's just a real kind of like I said, like a real kind of eeriness to it, and they do kind of that almost like megaphone kind of vocal effect where it almost sounds like he's inside of a box or something like that. But it was a pleasant surprise because I was really expecting it to do that thing that like Burning Bridges did, where the chorus would have a heavier part, and it just kind of stayed the course, which I think was a first on the album as far as the softer tunes go.
So this album, as we kind of come to a close here, I think I'd be remiss not to mention some of the accolades that it's received, and it's kind of just a good way to put a bow on it. Rock Hard Magazine named it the 412th best rock and metal album of all time. Loudwire named it number 15 for the top 25 power metal albums of all time, although I don't know that I would necessarily consider it power metal. And other outlets have called it essential power metal albums, and it made that list. It is clearly regarded as their best album. And I have to say, it was much better than I expected. And I don't have the nostalgia that other people have for it, but I thought it was a really good listen. Not perfect. Again, I had some issues with the production. I didn't think every song was a 10 out of 10, but I would give it a 7.75, and I can understand why some people would just be absolutely enamored by this because the vocals were a 10 out of 10. They were that good, and some of the songs were amongst the best music that was coming out in 1988. I just couldn't say that about every single track, but certainly a really good album. Yeah,
a very strong score. I'm a little bit below you at 7.25, but I thought it was a really good start for me for Crimson Glory. And I fully like accept the fact that like if you listen to this album when it came out, like I'm sure this is a 9 to a 10 for most of the people that have spent the last almost 40 years listening to this album, and I definitely acknowledge that. I just wanted to bring up one other thing that I thought was really fascinating that I learned via Wikipedia, and that the drums were a combination of live and sampled drums. The band sampled Dana Burnell's performing live drums into a synclavier without any cymbals, and then re-recorded the cymbals live later in order to have complete separation of drums and cymbals. And I think I don't know that I've ever heard of a band doing that. That's not to say that a band hasn't done it. I just never heard of a band doing that. And John Drenning stated in an interview, it was a very arduous and time-consuming way to do it, but at the time, it seemed like something we wanted to try to achieve, a pristine, clean sound and true separation of all instruments. And in retrospect, I feel like that they succeeded in doing that. I feel like the drums, like I mentioned on the onset, like in a 1988 mix of a metal album, the drums are very likely to get drowned out or just muddled or whatever. And I thought that they sounded really crisp. And so I wanted to mention that. I thought that was a really cool little tidbit from the making of the album.
Nice. I'm glad you mentioned that. And I guess maybe that's why I felt it was a bit uneven, where the drums really resonate in other spots. And then some spots it was like a little bit more subdued. And maybe that's just because it was a hard thing to equalize over the course of 10 tracks. But good stuff. Glad we covered it. I'm glad. And thank you to everyone that voted. I have no doubt we'll be covering them again at some point in the future. Lots of other albums from this band that we should talk about. But a couple of news items before we talk about next week. Colorado thrash band Havoc has announced a fall North American headlining tour. They're kicking off the tour in Salt Lake City on October 21st and doing a run of shows for about a month, ending up in their hometown of Denver, Colorado, or their home state of Colorado. Really cool band. I caught some of their set on 70K, and if you like thrash, you could do a lot worse than checking them out on their tour. And power metal stalwarts Primal Fear are releasing a new album called Shadow Riders in April of next year. Looking forward to new music from them. Ever since Magnus Carlsen has joined the band, I thought it has kind of breathed a little bit of new life into them. Obviously, he's a fantastic songwriter, so I'm looking forward to hearing new material from them. And I would be remiss not to mention this album, which is now, less than a year away.
That last one was my favorite Primal Fear album in a really long time. Yep. So I'm hoping that magic carries on to the next album. That good stuff. I look forward to that. I feel like they're a band that has just consistently released albums. I'm not going to say released great albums, but they've consistently released albums since I think their debut came out in 1998. And they have just almost like every 1 to 2 years, there's always a new Primal Fear album. And probably one of the reasons we've never covered them is because what the hell album do you pick?
Lineup changes be damned. They're coming out with a new one, right? It's just one of those things. But that brings us to next week. We have the request set for the beginning of September, but we're able to squeeze one more of your selections in before that. What are we listening to next week?
Interestingly that you mentioned Primal Fear, because I feel like it's a natural segue to a band that is connected to Primal Fear, and that being Gamma Ray. And I've been looking forward to discussing this album with you for a really long time, because I don't know that you're the biggest fan of this album. And the album I'm
New World Order?
It is. It's No World Order.
I don't like this album.
All right, perfect. That's why
prove me wrong. And I will. No. Kidding aside, I'm glad you chose it. I don't have a fondness for this album. Now, I'm not saying that can't change, but the reality is I never appreciated this album when it came out. And I'm not saying it was the end of Gamma Ray for me, but their best days, in my opinion, were behind them when this album came out. There's a couple of songs that I think are very good, but I don't know that the whole album is good. So I'm looking forward to this immensely. This is a good choice. And I think it's celebrating an anniversary, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, which was really the reason why I chose it. There wasn't a really great time to do the episode. It came out on September 10th in 2001, and that's like right in the throes of the Proud Power episode and everything. So we'll do it a little bit early, but yeah, it will be celebrating its 25th anniversary about a week and a half or so after, or maybe 2 weeks after we discuss it. But
well, I got some anniversary albums picked for September as well, and I think you're going to find some of them, or at least one of them, to be rather interesting.
Yeah, I've had this one in the back pocket for a while because I know that we have differing opinions on it, but I also think I wanted to ask you this week before we sign off, if you just off the top of your head, like from what you remember, what would you give this album out of 10 right now? And then we'll see if it improves next week.
It's a fair question. I haven't listened to this album in maybe 24 years. So I'm going to, at least 20, probably closer to the 25, right? So I want to put that out there. And I'm looking at the track list now, and some of the songs I remember vividly, and they are actually better than I remember, at least 3 or 4 of them. And then there's about 8 or 9 tracks that I have no recollection of whatsoever. I'm going to say it's a 6.5, maybe a 7. I would be shocked if I rate this thing higher than a 7.
Okay.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think...
Which is a good score, but not by their standards, where I was rating everything a 9.5, right? Like,
I think you'll go higher than a 7 after revisiting it. I'm just going to take a wild guess, only because I feel like over the years I've always kind of slept on this album, and then every time I put it on and go back to it, I'm always like, wow. Like each song comes on, I'm like, that's a good song. That's a good song. That's a good song. And then the next thing I know, the album's over. It just followed like one of the most incredible trilogy of albums ever. Like, following, like there had to be a drop off at some point after Land of the Free, Somewhere Out in Space, and Power Plant, which are the 3 albums we've already discussed by this band. So I think this really is an interesting, point in the band's history to talk about. And after this, in the future, I'd really like to go back and talk about those first 3 albums with Ralph Scheepers, that being the connection to Primal Fear that I mentioned earlier. But I've been really looking forward to this, and the anniversary made for perfect timing. So I'm hoping that maybe you have a change of heart of the unicorn when we when we discuss this one next week. But if nothing else, I think you'll just enjoy the upbeat power metal, to segue into next week.
No question about it. Good choice. I'm looking forward to it. And you forced me to listen to something I haven't listened to in, like I said, almost 25 years. So give us a like and a follow if you think you were doing a good job. And also consider joining our Patreon. We would love to have more of you join and see what that is all about. I promise you, if you give it a shot, you will think it is worth it. So
I would say this is the best time of the year to get involved with the Patreon, only because we have our Prog Power Primer bonus episode and the group chat that everybody is invited to join, which I think is going to be a lot of fun with a bunch of people that are chomping at the bit to get to Atlanta and see some of these bands. And so I'm excited to talk to everybody to see what everybody else is excited for. I'm going to invite everyone to come ready with your top 5 list of the 5 bands you're most excited for, and we'll all compare and contrast. And I guarantee you that much like Snowflakes, no 2 will be the same. So yeah, lots of good stuff to come. And we'll do in September. We'll do a bonus episode, kind of discussing next year's lineup, which we've kind of made a annual tradition. So some good stuff there. So looking forward to talking to you next week. We got our request after that, like you mentioned, and then it's off to Hotlanta for Prog Power 25.